Meeting. We are going to start our meeting today with a hearing on Senate Bill 235, enacting the Back to School Act to require school districts to provide a full-time in-person attendance option for all students beginning on March 26, 2021. So we will start with an explanation from our reviser. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure that the bill needs much more of an explanation. You actually just covered all of the points. The only thing I would add is the bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
There we go. Committee, what questions do you have for the reviser? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be one of the shortest bills I've ever seen, but I did want to ask about following line 10 for school year 2021 and each school year thereafter. So when it says each school year thereafter, it's talking about the full school year, not starting in March.
So for the school year 2020 to 2021, which is the current school year that we're in, this would apply on and after March 26th of 2021. For each school year thereafter means that this requirement would apply for every forthcoming school year. So 21, 22, 22, 23. So did that answer your question?
Yes, I just, I don't know, I just thought when that comment in every school district in this state shall provide in full-time, it kind of reflected back to the March 26th, so I'm just wondering, that's talking about the full school year. And that would be, when you say attendance option, there could be other options, but full attendance would be an option.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, we will begin with proponent testimony. We have today Senator Ty Masterson, President of the Kansas Senate. Welcome to the Education Committee. It's been a couple years since you've been here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It has been. Actually, this is the first time I've testified on a bill in 2 years, I think. I try to, only when it's important to me, right, do you engage yourself, and I thought this rose to that level, and I took my dad's advice of keep it simple, stupid, right? The whole KISS analogy, it really needs to be that simple. And so that's what this is. And the driver was, and by the way, you should have several of them, kind of this host of emails from parents and kids that are saying, wait a second. I mean, it's been, I don't think we anticipated. I think the reaction was warranted, right, to the remote learning. We didn't know what was happening, but it's been a year, almost a full year, that some of these kids haven't been in school. And so, and also not trying to be too draconian on it, you still provide an in-person option, right? So, because the option is really meant for the parents as much as anything, right? Remote learning can be valuable, but that we all know, and I've used it in my own family and my own kids, can be very valuable, but it takes engaged parents or motivated students to be highly effective. And so if you don't have that, you might have dual income learning parents, they both have jobs and got to be out, and a kid that may not be so motivated, they need to have that option. You need to have an option for these kids to be in school. And I actually pulled out one of the emails that we got, I thought I might even just share it with you. You should have it. This is the young man, Ian, and I'm just going to read it. My name is Ian. I'm currently an 8th grade student at Wheat Ridge Middle School in Gardner, Kansas. I've been advocating for my school to be back in person all year, and this is the bill that could make that happen. I left school on March 12th, 2020 for spring break. Our district finally decided to go hybrid by February 8th of 2021. I've stepped foot back into my middle school building 334 days since I left. To date, I've only been in person 3 times. The rest of my schooling has been completely online. Online schooling is not beneficial. Engaging discussions and in-depth learning experiences are gone. My 11-year-old brother and I deserve a better education. All students deserve a better education. Kids are suffering both academically and mentally. Please be our voice. I urge you to fight to put kids back in school. And this was just kind of a sample out that this kid, he's even advocating for his brother, right? And this is a kid. I brought that because it's not a parent even. This is a young man saying, hey, I need to be back. because the engagement, and that's part of what I've done here at the Senate, right? For those that resist some of the remote committee meeting, I think it's very important to have those relationships. And that's what's key, right? These kids need to have an in-person engagement and a relationship with a teacher. These kids, they're a broad group of kids that need that. And so we don't have that. They need that relationship instead, because what you end up with is isolation. Mom and dad have to go to work. You're there trying to, and so we just need to have an in-person option. So this was not meant to be draconian in any way. It's just saying time has told. We've got lots of federal dollars in the system now. With the vaccines are taking hold, we need to have an option for kids to have an in-person option. It doesn't even say every school has to have every kid in person, but every kid needs to have that option. So with that, Madam Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. We're going to do our other proponent, in-person proponent. Laura, did you want to come forward, please? And I need you to start by introducing yourself.
My name is Laura Clinging-Smith. Do I need to say my address or anything? I'm not, my first time here, so I'm not going to be as polished as Senator Masterson, so.
We're going to stop and have you turn on the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I have a very soft voice, so I apologize for that. So my name is Laura Clinging-Smith. I do live in House District 27 in Senate District 37. I want to thank you for allowing me to testify here today in person. I promise I will not cry, but I want to thank you and commend all of you for creating a simple bill to put kids first, to put them over the devastating leadership decisions that have happened in the past year. While my daughter, who is a junior at Blue Valley West High School, we've been very lucky with her, but that is not the case in our community. My friend's daughter is taking antidepressant medications. She's in middle school because she cannot handle her new normal. She cannot handle the isolation she is in. Another parent who, by the grace of God, her son was completely unsuccessful in taking his life. The nurses in the ER confided in her that they cannot understand why the news media is not broadcasting the number of kids coming in on a daily basis who are trying to take their lives. This week, parents spoke at the Shawnee Mission School District about their middle school son who just took his life because he cannot handle the isolation. You can watch the most heartbreaking video you've ever seen because Shawnee Mission posted it to their website. Another friend of mine who's a middle school teacher said they're just not logging on anymore. They don't care because they are no longer connected to a society. What about all the children who live in at-risk situations, abusive situations? Teachers have been trained for years to identify those kids, but they're going unnoticed. The Johnson County Mental Health Crisis Hotline has reported a 35% increase in calls in 2020 versus the prior year. And it's not just the emotional issues. We're dealing with the educational issues. These kids are not learning. Remote learning, online learning, hybrid learning, it's not working. Students do not have the maturity to stay focused in an online environment all day, every day. They don't have the attention span. So if you're not going to be able to gain their attention, how are they going to learn that lesson? I cannot tell you how many times my daughter's teachers have said to a child, turn your video on so I know that you are still awake, or get out of bed. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Go to a table so you can do your lesson. We heard for years screen time was bad for our kids, to limit it, to now it's the only way to educate our children. Why are we not following the science? We know increased screen time for children increases anxiety and depression, but we're not doing that. K-1 education is critical to the success of our children, but school boards and school districts have deprived this from children for the past 12 months out of fear because they are afraid. And our teachers have been asked to do the impossible, a hybrid class that is a Zoom class and in person at the same time. Those are 2 lesson plans every day for every single class. And they are doing the best they can, but they are stretched beyond reasonable doubt. My daughter has said her teachers, and she goes to a phenomenal school, great staff, wonderful principal, but her teachers are unapproachable. They're hard to get in touch with. They just are standoffish. And it's not because they don't care or they're mean or they're not doing their job. They just physically don't have the time. And what is so sad in all of this is there are schools in this state, private schools and some public schools, that have been open 5 days a week in person since August. So why is not every child in this state afforded that same luxury? So I want you guys to do whatever you can to get this bill passed because our kids are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee, you have 9 pieces of written proponent testimony. I know you also have received lots of emails, as I have. We're going to open it up for questions for proponents. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for either one of you who would like to come to the microphone, and that is particularly.
Why don't you both get up to the
for you.
microphone, and then we won't go back and forth. How about
Right.
that?
You know, I believe that most of us on this, if not all of us on this committee, believe in local authority. And Senator Baumgardner and I went to a gym full of parents, were invited to a gym full of parents and students, completely frustrated with their local school board, and they felt that the school board was leaning upon the recommendations of the governor. And so my question to you is, have you gone to your school board? Have other parents gone to the school board, and what has been their response from Blue Valley?
Yes, we have done rallies. We have been there.
Need you to please
sorry.
lean into that mic so
Sorry.
everyone can hear
Again,
you.
my voice is really soft. I apologize. But we have done rallies. We have shown up to talk to them. We have sent emails. We have done everything. But to be quite honest with you, they are siding more with the teachers union about it's not safe for a teacher to be in the classroom, in a nutshell. We have been able to get school sports because these kids need activities. They need something to do. Only to then not be able to allow to attend as parents, that we then had to turn around and fight just to allow 2 people to attend, to watch our child play, do debate, or whatever it is. But yes, we have been very vocal in trying to get our school leaders to listen to us, but they're just not. And I don't have an answer as to why they're not, but they just won't listen to us.
Thank you. And my final question, if I may, Madam Chair, is do you feel that this bill would be helpful for your local school board to have some direction?
So in Blue Valley, they put out a survey last August. 75% of all parents wanted in-person learning. So this bill just makes them listen to us, to be quite honest with you. It will make them finally do what we want.
Okay, thank you.
She said she's not smooth. I would add, so that's part of the two things, dealing with the locals, is one, that's the reason we put option in there, right? So, because it's about having the kid that has the need and it shall be provided. Number 2, because of those pressures that are coming on, many of you have said on these type of more of a localized board where, it's your neighbors and some of the pressures that come, and it may be undue, it gives them a relief valve to make this decision to say, whether it's the union or whoever it is that's saying, we don't want this, well, the state says we have to at least provide this option, and it gets them that choice. But the truth is, actually, what I just realized sitting here listening to this conversation about and thinking about, we do have schools that have been in person since August. So where's the discussion about equitable education now? Right? It's always been about dollars. I'd contend we have disequalized education in the current situation because you have some kids that are affording this opportunity of in-person education and others that it's prohibited. So there's a lawsuit implication on that as well because it isn't all about money, right? It is about the opportunity for these kids. So that'd be the other comment I'd make.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would add we've all received multiple emails. One that I received yesterday was from a teacher in Fort Scott who had said, we have been in person since the beginning of the year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, not a question, but a comment. There was an article by Reuters, April 6th of 2020, that stated school closures will have little impact on COVID-19 control, a review finds. We knew this almost an entire year ago. The science has proven it now, but we knew this science almost an entire year ago. Why are we not following what the science tells us. Thank you.
Committee other, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this. Every kid is different. My two children are both in high school. One chose in person and one chose online. And so I was dealing with that in my own house. But I guess I have a question for research, or maybe it'll be one of the other people who are conferees. How many of our schools, because I know in Johnson County, a lot of those have gone or going back March 1st. I just want to know how many school districts will not be having an in-person option prior to March 25th, if we could get that information.
Mr. Tallman, did you want to address that? Or perhaps Norma, did you want to address that?
Madam Chair, this is Mark Tallman. I don't think we know that for sure, because I think that districts are trying to move toward this, but many are trying to follow whether they can meet guidelines dealing with things like social distancing. And so I don't think there's a way to say definitely which districts will be doing that, but I think throughout the year, more and more have been moving toward that. And perhaps Norma knows more.
Madam Chair, I don't know that, as Mr. Tallman pointed out, that there's a statewide data set for all the school districts saying whether or not they'll be in person by a certain date. We can certainly compile. Some of the school districts I know have posted that information, planned dates that they'll be back in person. And I believe the Department of Education has compiled some information on school districts, whether they've been in person for at least part of the year so far this school year. Of course, that data, they're more doing the primary learning source. So if 3 out of the 4 months were remote learning, the school district would be noted as remote learning rather than perhaps they were in person for a month. So I can definitely, we can work to compile, if there are specific school districts as well that you'd like that information for, we can certainly compile that, but at this time, I don't have that information.
Thank you. I do want to share with the committee, since Norma just spoke with us, I did make the request from her to provide the information with regard to, I know we keep hearing that funding is an issue as far as helping school districts be open. And one of the things that Norma shared with us is, so the different sources have been the ESSER fund, as well as the money, the Spark Task Force money that went to counties, which then was allocated to school districts. But in all, 153.5 million has gone to school districts from federal funding. And of that, so far, 41.4 million has been drawn down. So right now, our school districts have roughly $112 million that has not been drawn down, and that's of the federal money that's come in. And I think we all know that another 300 and some million is scheduled to come into our state for schools. So I just wanted to provide that information. Yes, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of along those lines, and this is a question for both of the conferees. If we are able to draw down those funds, would you be supportive of paying hazard pay for those teachers who were, on the front lines teaching, not always able to have the precautions or the equipment that they needed, but they were there. I mean, they were also, I have a lot of friends who are teachers and they're there every day, doing hybrid, in-person, online, a lot of stresses there. So I guess my question is just, would you be supportive of providing hazard pay for those teachers?
I mean, it's an interesting question, and as the chairman pointed out, I mean, there are tens of millions of dollars that have flowed in that are extraordinary funding, into the system, and how each district may want to handle it. I would, and by the way, one of the benefits of a bill like this being publicized is I've seen since its introduction, a number of schools that are going, wait, we probably should head down this direction, and including our governor trying to move forward those that are being vaccinated, right, to try to catch up, because there's clearly a public need for this. The interesting thing of pay, I mean, I'd be your local school districts. I would say that the hazard, if there's somebody that has a significant risk, you should probably have a substitute, right? Because it's about the children. You want to operate in a safe way, but if you're not forcing someone to take an unusual health risk. We do have, as Senator Straub pointed out, there's a tremendous amount of data now around this and how, how children operate with COVID or without, and what the risks truly are. For most, the bulk, I would say there's not an extraordinary risk over any other normal school year with normal sicknesses that go through at any level. But that would certainly be a local decision on how they wanted to handle a teacher, and they should have the resources to do that.
Thank you. Next up, we're going to go to neutral testimony, and we have Maddie Holscher. She's a freshman in Olathe School District. Maddie, welcome to our committee meeting, and thank you for being here.
Sorry, I'm short. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So, thank you for this opportunity. 1 minute, I can't see. I am Maddie Holscher, providing a neutral testimony on SB 235. Chairperson Baumgartner and esteemed members of the Senate Education Committee, I am testifying today as a student in the remote education at the Olathe Public School District. I am a freshman at Olathe North, and I am in the Distinguished Scholars Program. Please know, all of us hope for a return to normalcy and want to safely get back to school as we have missed being in person. The reason I'm here, though, is I don't want people to fall into the false narrative that all our students are failing. I know I've heard that line. As well as other similar ones in the media and etc., mentioning in regard to virtual learning. I have been remote since the beginning of the school year. While it has been different, it doesn't mean it has been impossible, and it certainly hasn't been a failure. Obviously, being in person for education is likely optimal. However, the fact of the matter is we are in a pandemic that requires things to be done differently. I will tell you, I have seen our teachers going above and beyond to connect with students, engage us in conversation in class, and educate us. In fact, I can even do debate, and I can go to competitions and compete too, because I can still do it even though I'm remote. I also recognize our educators have been spending long hours working on things to do differently, as they were not trained to teach in a virtual format, all while schedules have changed numerous times throughout the year. I chose to stay remote for many reasons when, at the end of the semester, we got the option if we wanted to switch in person or if in person wanted to be remote and vice versa. I chose to stay remote because I wanted to be consistent, and I love my teachers who have been doing a great job in this new mode of instruction. My siblings, one of them is a senior and the other one is an 8th grader in middle school, also chose to stay remote for some of the same reasons. There are things that I consider to be a benefit for online school. I can quickly and privately ask questions to the teacher through the online chat. I don't have to literally run from one class to another during 5-minute breaks while I'm in school. And classes are very complete and coherent because virtual requires a great deal of prep work by the teachers. I recognize online may not work for some. Likewise, in person is a struggle for certain students as well. There are many different situations due to a very diverse student body. Our schedules have been switched several times this year, and we have recently achieved some needed consistency with online education. And if you continue switching, it will make things more difficult and more stress will be added. In closing, I request that you don't refer to this as a lost year. We are growing, learning, and ultimately surviving a pandemic. I would ask state work to get us back to school safely, and that whatever the format of learning that is needed or utilized, the state will fully fund our public schools. Thank you.
We do have some other written neutral testimony. Are there any questions for Maddie? Thank you so much for being with us. We will now move to our opponent testimony in person. Nope, he's virtual. We have Mark Tallman, Associate Executive Director, Kansas Association of School Boards. Mr. Tallman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. It's always tough to follow a student like that. So I just want to concentrate, I think, on two issues. The first is, and I think what you've heard from the proponents of this bill, is that a lot of the reaction is to what happened in this school year right now and the desire to get students back. And that's almost a question of, do you want to move away from what we set out as being a local decision to saying the state has now had enough? And that's a decision you'll have to make. In my testimony, I really want to note, though, that as we read this bill, it would continue in effect indefinitely into the future, even if we're in very different circumstances. This would, it seems to us, not allow a remote only environment in other circumstances. For example, a different type of pandemic. We might have a pandemic that was more likely to affect students as possible. It doesn't make exceptions for weather emergencies. It doesn't appear to remove the county health authority for quarantine orders. And one reason some schools shut down was when they literally didn't have enough staff to operate. And then by looking at things like requiring full-time learning, well, right now districts may offer non-full-time learning during the summer. Doesn't make an exception for students who are suspended or expelled. It doesn't make an exception for older students who districts now might say, if you want to stay and finish your diploma over 19, we'll provide you a virtual opportunity, but not allow to come into high school. The proponents have not talked about anything, so I'm assuming these things aren't the purpose of the bill. But we would encourage you, if you move ahead of this, to consider what may be broad unintended consequences going forward in very different environments. Last thing I'd just like to say is, I think as we've talked to school board members around the state, all of them want to get kids back as soon as they believe it's safely possible, based on what they're hearing for everyone in their community. And just to remember, the people of Kansas will have a chance to weigh in on those decisions. School board members are going to be on the ballot this fall with local elections. New members may get elected, and you're again going to have to make a choice about how much does the legislature decide what options they may have in the future to operate. So thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Laura Bors, the Board of Education President, Garden City, USD 457. Welcome to our meeting, Laura.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity, Senator Baumgartner, to address the committee. My name is Laura Bors, and I currently serve as the president of the USD 457 Board of Education in Garden City, as you stated. I'm also the Region 10 Vice President of the Kansas Association of School Boards. In my first job, I am the mother of 2 high school students. To be clear, I believe it is very important for students to have the opportunity for in-person learning. Just as everyone else, I wish for nothing more than this pandemic to end and for us to all return to a more normal sense of living. Today, I am testifying in opposition of Senate Bill 235. My first concern with this legislation is that this decision has been and should be made by local school boards who take into consideration what is appropriate in each school district given the local conditions. During the summer of 2020, Garden City Public Schools engaged approximately 200 stakeholders, including representatives from the local health department, in developing a plan for conducting school during the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan placed a priority on keeping things as normal as possible while putting in place reasonable mitigation strategies to keep students, staff, and families safe. The plan is grounded in using local data and evidence to inform decisions about the level of operation employed each week. To illustrate my position, I will briefly outline the circumstances that have occurred in Garden City thus far in the pandemic. Finney County saw its surge in positive cases in late April and early May of 2020.
When USD 457 began school August 31st, we had 1,900 cases, making us one of the highest case rates when adjusted for population. After 10 weeks of in-person learning, we were faced with an additional 1,797 cases by early November, and we made the decision to go to hybrid learning. After 2 weeks of hybrid learning and an increase of 827 cases and a consistent positivity rate of 41% or higher, we transitioned to remote learning to the end of 2020. Immediately after coming back from winter break, the district returned to in-person learning. The number of new positive COVID-19 and the positivity rate in our community has improved considerably. Last week, the positivity rate reached the lowest level experienced in Finney County at 7%. We have maintained in-person learning for all grade levels for the past 7 weeks since the return of school. We continue to work closely with our local health department in monitoring the current conditions and making any necessary adjustments. Of the many factors that we must consider when determining the appropriate method for conducting school during a pandemic is the availability of teachers and staff. Every position in the school is important in creating a safe and positive environment for our students to learn. During our most difficult weeks this fall, substitute fill rates were
Laura, we just lost you, but I believe we do have your full testimony. There you are. You're back again.
okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
As
Did you
much as
wanna-
everyone had to have staff to supervise the students, and we could not continue to place more burden on our remaining teachers. I will direct you to the charts included within my written testimony, which illustrate the positivity rates and the new rates in Finney County, as well as the average daily absences by week for USD 457 and when we made the decisions for our various levels. As I mentioned earlier, my first job is as a mother to 2 high school students. This is a very expensive job, so I need another one. I'm a lawyer too. I would ask you to consider Article 6, Section 2, subsection A of the Kansas Constitution before you. That the legislature shall provide for a state board of education, which shall have general supervision of public schools, educational institutions, and all the educational interests of the state. This issue should certainly fall under this category. In the event that you disagree that this should be left up to local boards of education as authorized under Article 6, Section 5 of the Kansas Constitution, then it should be left up to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education has taken their call to duty to protect the students of Kansas seriously with their Navigating Change and Navigating Next documents. They have called upon some of the best minds with the educators of the state in creating these documents. Let us truly celebrate National Public Schools Week. Please vote no on this bill and allow local boards to continue making the decisions for their districts utilizing local data. I appreciate your time and consideration, and when appropriate, I would like to stand for questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Mark DeSetti, Legislative and Political Advocacy for KNEA. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to respond. A lot of the union is doing this, the union is doing this. The union doesn't make these decisions. Local union members may be advocating for their personal positions, but they are not making the decisions. The decisions are made by school boards. So let me make that very clear. Secondly, make it also clear that the union on the state level has not advocated at any time for the closure of schools. In fact, our comments have always been about returning to schools full time. It is the desire of our members to be back in their classrooms with their students every day. Nothing could be more important to them than that. So let me make that clear. Our members also run the gamut, from those who are terrified to come back to those who don't understand why we ever stopped, and everything in between. So to characterize the union as closing our schools is completely false, and frankly, kind of offensive to teachers. To a point made by our neutral testimony from Maddie. My wife is a remote learning coordinator for her school. It's a private school, but she's handling remote learning for students. She's online from about 7:30 in the morning until I'm telling her at 7 o'clock at night, dinner is getting cold and please get up. Her hours have never been longer or more frustrating or more packed than they under this circumstance. She wants back in her school. Everybody wants back in their schools. There's no teacher that doesn't. Frankly, and Senator Straub, I believe, and Senator Masterson, I have to tell you, I have to agree with almost everything Senator Masterson said. He made very good points. Senator Straub and Senator Masterson both referred to the spread of the disease among children. And that's something we did not know when the school buildings initially closed last March. But we did learn that eventually, that the passing the infection and the impact of the infection on children was much different than it is among adults. And that, unfortunately, is not a perfect argument to return to school, because schools are staffed by adults. Schools are, from their cafeteria workers to their custodians to the teachers, the paraprofessionals, those are all adults who are subject to this disease. And we need to protect those people. We do need to prioritize, now that we have the vaccine available, teachers need to be at the top of the list, because if we're going to reopen safely, and that's what we want to return to schools full time for our teachers. We need to have every teacher get a vaccine. Every teacher, that needs to be available first and foremost, is to make sure that every teacher, every paraprofessional, every custodian, every principal working in our buildings has that vaccine. Because then, of course, they're not going to get sick, as we've seen already from the vaccine results. Unfortunately, what we don't understand about even the vaccine is whether or not a vaccinated person is a carrier of the virus and can carry it back into their homes or into the community. So we still have to practice all of the things that we need to have in place: mask wearing, social distancing, hygiene. Those must continue to be practiced even as we return. And some of the complaints are about mask wearing in schools. Children can pass the virus to their teachers. They can pass it to the custodian. They can even pass it to each other, who take it home and pass it to their parents and grandparents. We need to do everything we can, everything in our power. I would suggest also that back when the governor made the initial closure order back last March, this legislature was upset about that. Everybody was upset because we didn't want our schools closed, but we knew we had to do it because of what we learned at that time, what we knew at that time. But the legislature decided that a state mandate was a bad idea. We're not going to mandate this. We have to push these decisions to the local communities, to the local health officers and county commissions. And here is a bill doing the exact opposite, coming back and saying we can't trust local boards of education and working with their counties and their health offices to make these decisions locally. It's the reverse. It's now we need a state mandate to reopen. I don't know whether every school is going to be open on March 26th, whether it's going to be tomorrow or it's March 27th. But we have to trust our local school boards working with their communities, their health officials, to make these decisions. And we know that parents have been very vocal on both sides of this issue before their school boards, stressing school boards out, I would imagine. We need to return to school, absolutely. We need to do it when we can protect our communities. And this legislature determined in the special session that was a decision best left to local community, locally elected officials like county commissioners and school boards. it's either the appropriate thing to leave it to the local community or it's not. And now we're just choosing when it's convenient for us. I would ask you to let local school boards make this decision, let them work with their communities, with their patrons, and their county commissions, make the right decision. I also believe, frankly, that we're probably going to make this date anyway. At the rate people are getting vaccinated and moving, and the rate, the drop in infections and deaths from this virus at this time. With that, I would stand for questions at the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Committee, I want to make sure that you see that we do have 2 letters of written opposition. Questions? I'll call on Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for all of those here testifying today. I do have a couple of questions. I'd like to preface my questions by saying I've heard the opponents talk about the effect on adults, on local control, and quoting the Constitution, which, by the way, Article 6, Section 1, states that the legislature shall provide for intellectual, educational, vocational, and scientific improvement by establishing and maintaining public schools, educational institutions, and related activities which may be organized and changed in such manner as may be provided by law. What I haven't heard the opponents address are the students. And I would like to ask the opponents their opposition to this bill based on the needs of the students and the effect that it's having on our students academically, socially, emotionally, the effect on the kids. I too am a former educator. I knew that when I signed up to be a teacher that there were a lot of inherent risks taking in that, and our teachers have risen to the occasion. The teachers aren't the problem. The problem is the lack of focus on the decision makers at the local level, on focusing on the needs of the students instead of the needs of the system. So I would like to hear the opponents address the impact on our kids and why an option for in-person learning for those kids suffering on those levels isn't appropriate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Tom, well, we're going to let them respond, and please be
Okay.
brief. We do need to be on the floor in 15 minutes.
Absolutely. Senator, members of the committee, I think the best way I can respond is to only say I've never been in a conversation with school board members where they weren't concerned about learning. But learning, if you are trying to do it in a situation where teachers are becoming sick, where community spread, where parents are becoming sick, can be a part of that. Those are things that need to be taken into account as well. And so I guess my best answer is to say what local school boards tried to do is weigh not just the student learning needs, but the interests of the entire community. And that has to do with many factors in addition to learning itself, as we know for students. That and the fact that I think boards, local boards, have tried to receive medical guidance from what they believe are experts in the field, who suggested that it is very important to bring people back, but the recommendation is to do so when appropriate mitigating factors can be in place, and it has taken time to get to that point. And the reason I think we've seen an increase in the pace of people coming back is because as soon as boards feel those factors can be put in place, they will do so. And finally, what I think boards are doing now is working on what to do to mitigate the impact on students from the whatever learning loss there may have been for the students that experience that. So they'll be looking to the steps they can take moving forward to address that issue. Thank you.
May I address it as well?
Briefly, please. We have other questions.
if you look at the charts and within my written testimony, the only time that we were in remote was when we had a positivity rate of over 41%, and it reached the level of 65% within Garden City. We tried to limit the amount of time that we were in remote and even tried to individualize different schools when we were in remote as well. But it became to the point where we did not have the teachers to fill the classrooms in order to supervise the children to stay open. And I think that overwhelmingly, if you speak with the local boards, we want to be in person. No one likes being in remote. We want to have that in-person option. And we have tried to do that to the best of our ability. And that's why we need to have that local control looking at the local data. And as I believe others have stated as well, you have the local officials. The best option is looking at the government closest to the people with regard to this. And you have, as I believe Mr. Tallman mentioned earlier, the local elections come November, that if the people don't like how we were running things at that time, they have the opportunity to vote us out in November with how we were running things during this pandemic. But we want in-school options. We did that the best that we could, and we only had 3 schools of remote in Garden City during this entire time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Giuseppe, or actually, let's direct this to Mr. Tallman. You have often come before this committee with regard to the issue of equity. And so talk to us about equity and KCK being one of our lowest socioeconomic school districts, still not being in person for any learning.
Well, I would certainly agree that equity is going to be a concern. And I think, unfortunately, and I am in no way an expert on KCK or the specifics of other districts, but what I've been given to understand is a large, highly concentrated urban area with that sort of school district is a district where it's extremely hard to put in place the mitigating strategies that are recommended and that I believe their board was trying to follow. Fortunately, because the federal CARES money, ESSER money that is coming is really put on a poverty basis, on the Title I basis, that means districts like KCK will have more resources coming to them to be able to do that remediation. It absolutely is a problem, I agree, but I think there's resources going to be provided to deal with that.
Mr. Tallman, I think you heard earlier, we have $112 million of federal money that has come in that has not been drawn down yet. It's not been drawn down, and it was specifically for schools.
My understanding is that what districts have done are looking at using those dollars over the course of the year. So they did not use it all right away because they didn't know how much might have to be used during the balance of the year. So I can't give you individual circumstances, but that's my understanding. The amount of money that has been drawn down when I most recently looked is roughly comparable to the point in the school year we are.
Mr. Tallman, and for those that are listening, of the $153 million that have come in from the federal government, only 41 million of that has been drawn down. So we are now in February. We have March, April, May left of the school year. We haven't spent half. We spent less than 1/3 of the federal money that has come in. And I think that's the issue. We cannot say resources aren't made available. They're there. Funding is there. We haven't found ways to help these school districts, at least it doesn't seem as if leadership is there to help these school districts to get open. I have Senator Straub, Senator Petty, and then Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. DeSetti. He stated that we had to close schools last spring, back in March. I believe that decision was made by the governor. It was a unilateral decision made by the governor to close schools. What scientific information was she using to be the first in the nation to close our public schools?
I can't tell you everything that she was using. She was following the advice of our state's chief health officer, Dr. Lee Norman, and the CDC. I can't tell you exactly. I was not privy to her decision making. I can't tell you. You'd have to go back and ask the governor that question.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I know there's been so many questions. I was going to ask our proponents a question, but they just left and didn't get to ask at that time. So I thought it was pretty interesting that, and Laura, the superintendent from Garden City, you shared some important information with us. So in Garden City, you've been in person, and then you've gone hybrid and virtual, and then back to in person again. Is that correct?
And to be clear, I'm the president of the school board. I'm not the superintendent.
I'm sorry, Laura.
So just to clarify, we've gone through almost all of our different levels of our plan. We have 7 different levels within our plan, and we have used almost all except for our lowest levels. But we did 10 weeks of in-person learning from the very beginning, and then we went to our hybrid, which is remote some days for some of our students, and then in person, and then switching to try to reduce the number of students that we have in the school buildings themselves. And then we did remote for the whole district for 3 days. We've had some schools that were remote while we still had students in school. And then we've been in person since January 5th till now. Excuse me, we had 5 schools in remote. So at various times during the first portion of the year.
So it's been driven by numbers and by percentages, not only within the community, but within the building itself, and availability of subs.
Yes.
Thank you. And
no.
And I'm sorry, we had 5 weeks of remote, not 3 weeks. Sorry.
Senator, we're going to let Senator Gossage. We're not going to just keep going. Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very quickly. The chair had mentioned Kansas City, Kansas, School District 500, USD 500. I was just told that they are going to go in person, but what they're calling in person is any student that has connectivity issues, like the young woman who's a sophomore who's been walking in very low temperatures to a McDonald's to get better connectivity, can be picked up by a school bus and taken to school where she will have better connectivity, but her teacher will still be remote. But they're calling that in person. And then the discussion that was brought up earlier about, well, we went by the best scientific information that we received, but you know, written testimony is also very important, and I noticed under Dr. Jill Ackerman's testimony, there's a full timeline, including a letter that was published by the New England Journal of Medicine summarizing data from 2 million children and teachers in Sweden showing the occupational risk to teachers was no different than for non-teachers. And then my question is, are you aware that this past summer, before school ever started, Children's Mercy Hospital out of Kansas City did a full webinar as well as in-person workshops for decision makers in the school district as well as parents, explaining why they should be back in person in schools and why that was important not only for children's mental health but for their learning. Were you aware of that? Any of the opponents?
This is Mark Tolman. I'm not aware of that specifically that you're talking about. What I know and what I believe most school districts at least looked at as a starting point of data is the fact that the Department of Education put together a panel of Kansas immunologists and pediatricians and other experts for Kansas to look at information and set out recommendations. Districts didn't always follow it. Often districts were criticized because they didn't follow it as much. But I think that has been kind of the overriding Kansas-based information that they were looking at. Certainly you and anyone can disagree with whether that was the right thing, but I think that was the primary medical information that they were looking at.
So it's information offered by the state. Thank you.
Yes.
The Finney County Medical Director, Dr. Lindsay Burns, is one of the pediatricians who is on the, I guess, the state panel. So, and she is one of the individuals who helps provide a lot of the information that we use to guide our weekly decisions.
Okay.
So we are, I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to cut you off. I have two more questions, and then committee, we will be adjourned. So I have Senator Clues, and then I have Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not really a question, just a couple statements here. And obviously, I feel the feelings on both sides of this debate and the tension, and I realize they're real for both sides. This bill is where it says option for all. It's really a strong recommendation. The act to require the school districts, there's really no consequence as a result of them not responding to what I'm seeing. Now, at the same time, as we look at the amount of students, and I mentioned this on the floor some time back, that we have over 18,000 students out. And it's, again, just my recommendation to the school boards, those making these decisions. The longer we're out, the more traction we're going to see for parents keeping their children out, wanting to get their children into homeschool, wanting to get their children into private schools. And so that's all I wanted to leave with this, and hopefully we can move forward. To me, this is a nudge that we've got to get open safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be quick. I am a supporter of local control, and I guess my question is, was there any thought, because I know there are a lot of kids who have been thriving with online, whether it's the stresses, emotional, and I guess my question is, if we're going to require this at a state level that each school provide a full-time in-person, would we not require that they would offer a full-time online? That's just, I think, for us to be thinking as we're looking, because there are a lot of kids who have really thrived in this environment. And thank you.
I'm going to just close with this as we are closing the hearing on Senate Bill 235. And I want to clarify, there is no mandate in Senate Bill 235. There is no mandate. I think we need to be careful when we say a lot of kids this, most kids that. What we have learned in testimony is we do not even know how many school districts still have grade levels that do not have an option for in-person learning. That is the lack of oversight that we do not know that. It's not been made clear how many kids have been impacted for how many days of no face-to-face opportunities. So it is a gentle nudge. I don't think anyone is accusing teachers, administrators, board members of anything in particular, but what we do know is there are kids that have not had an opportunity since March of last year to be in the classroom, and that should be a grave concern for all of us. I do remind the committee we will meet tomorrow. It is going to be at 12:30, not 1:30. You should have received an email about that yesterday. So we will be working bills. Thank you very much, and our meeting is adjourned.